This is the Knowledge Graph Insights podcast, episode number 9. One of the main benefits of semantic technology is the ability to sort out business logic independent of data and data from the applications in which it's used. Katariina Kari has captured in knowledge graphs the business expertise of e-commerce giants like IKEA and Zalando to power better search and recommendation systems and to generally provide a better experience for both internal users and external customers, resulting in millions of dollars in new sales.
Welcome to the Knowledge Graph Insights podcast, where experts on knowledge graphs and the semantic web share their wisdom with the digital and business communities. Our mission is to demystify and democratize knowledge graph technology and practices to make the benefits of knowledge graphs and semantic technology accessible to all. And now, here's your host, Larry Swanson.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 9 of the Knowledge Graph Insights podcast. I am really delighted today to welcome to the show Katariina Kari. Katariina is a longtime, deeply embedded in the community knowledge graph professional. She's done a lot of e-commerce work at places like IKEA and Zalando. She's currently the head of data at a stealth startup that we can't talk too much about. But welcome, Katariina. Tell the folks a little bit more about what you're up to these days.
Yeah, thank you, Larry, and thank you for having me in your podcast. I could say that I've been really lucky to have worked in the industries and especially in the lifestyle sector, e-commerce sector, for the past 8 years. So very early on, before even graph databases were really commercialized, I had the opportunity to start building knowledge graphs. And so now when there's someone out there who's like, oh, I need a knowledge graph, I can confidently say, well, I've done it a few times, so I can tell you, I can advise you, or I can even run a team for you that can build a knowledge graph. And it's just shown me a lot of practical things. Is giving me a really good perspective on what works from theory and from research and what actually doesn't, or doesn't yet work, or isn't mature enough yet for an applied setting in commercial use.
That point you just brought up. You have a PhD in something, right?
No, I don't have a PhD. I never really went into research. I have a few published articles, like scientific articles, that I did towards the end of my master's. But I actually just have 2 masters. I have a master's in technology, and then I have a master's in music, arts management, because I've always carried this love for both art as well as technology, and I always wanted to combine them.
You know, I didn't plan it this way, but the episode right before this one, number 8, was Vera Brozzoni, who's a metadata strategist at the BBC, and she comes out of classical music. So if you don't know Vera, you two have to meet and talk music and data and stuff. But one of the things you mentioned there is one of the things in this community is, and the reason I assumed it's usually safe to assume in this world that somebody has a PhD. But you've always been more focused on the practice side than the research side, which is awesome. That's because I'm all about sharing practice. So thank you for being focused that way. And you have all this experience, like coming up on 8 years of experience at IKEA and Zalando, 2 of the biggest retail brands in the country or in the world. I mean, and one of the things that I want to kind of gently take you to task for something in a talk I saw you do recently, this hour-long talk, brilliant stuff about a lot of the stuff we'll talk about today. But right in the middle of that talk, you just kind of matter-of-factly mentioned and we're realizing 7-figure, business benefits across this. I'm like, wait, what? And in my journalism training, we would call that burying the lead. But that's kind of at a top level. There's real obvious business benefits to adopting knowledge graph technology. Can you talk about what is it that's unique about the work you've done and this technology that permits these massive revenue gains?
I would say that one part of it is the work, but the other part of it is working with big brands like Zalando, Europe's biggest e-commerce for fashion, and then IKEA, one of the most known trademarks or brands in the world. So their volumes in e-commerce are huge. So if you add a positive change to the customer experience, like giving quality recommendations or just improving a few of the worst performing search terms, you get a lot of the volume is so big, the benefit is really big, and it's already in that category of seven-figure sums. So that's why I think like maybe not every little e-commerce site can invest in this technology first. It's great that these big brands are actually investing in, so we can figure out exactly how to do it, and then that can be brought to maybe like a smaller volume e-commerce setting or a smaller volume industry, so that they can then make sense of these best practices. That's at least the way I see it. But yeah, I mean, just being able to improve a big website's performance, just doing a little optimization is already moving the needle quite a lot.
Right. And once you've articulated those best practices, you can picture it, smaller businesses benefiting from it. But right now, it takes quite a team to put this together. I've heard you talk a lot about the skills that it takes, the roles that you need to execute on those skills, and then the human element, the thing that our friend Ashley Faith calls the data therapy part of this. Can you talk a little bit, well, I guess first about like, what does it take to what are the skills that you need, the knowledge, the wherewithal in your organization to actually make a knowledge graph project like the ones you've worked on happen?
Well, when you work with these industries in like e-commerce, they'll probably have already very brilliant backend developers. And backend developers, I think, are the most versatile and adaptive developers out there. I've seen them adapt to new technologies really quickly, even into RDF or this like whole knowledge graph semantic web technology stack. So you probably will have those already in there. And then the only thing you need is like maybe one semantic web professional, like an ontologist, just to bring in the whole RDF and educate the backend developers so that they know how to spin up a graph database and do the data pipelines for semantic ETL or semantic transformation of the data. But then, yes, there's that human element, that process together with the domain experts that Ashley Faith calls data therapy. And we agree that we should call it data therapy. And that is something that is implicitly kind of done in companies by a product manager. So there's anyway, business and tech anyway need to talk. Some engineers would embrace domain-driven design to kind of get that out, but it's all stuck in code. So when you do it with semantic web technologies, or you have your semantic web professional, they'll be formalizing that, leading the process of kind of getting the domain expertise out. And then instead of putting it into like locking it away in some siloed bit of code, they'll actually make it into like a computable resource within the company. So that's like the difference. And what I'm trying to say is most of these things that you need to build a knowledge graph already exist in the company. Just need like a professional for the semantic web bit, like one person to then put it all together. Then what takes more time, more resources is when you're when you're first setting up the entire infrastructure for housing a knowledge graph. I think that's an investment that's an investment that's, needs something like 1 to 2 years to build up. But after that, like for example in Zalando, I think the infrastructure is there. Doesn't really need a team, or it needs like little maintenance currently. I don't know. I don't work at Zalando anymore, so I cannot say for sure. But that's how I understood that it's now kind of in the background running and just needs a little bit of maintenance.
You just reminded me of the thing that's everywhere now, the role of LLMs in this new world. That because one of the things about that, that's been an obstacle for a lot of people, for a lot of organizations, that 1 to 2 year up ramping. But it sounds like from talking to if you just having been at the Knowledge Graph conference the last few years and reading, following people like Tony Seal and Mike Dillinger and you and folks on LinkedIn, it sounds like that the LLMs or AI in general and LLMs in particular are helping maybe to accelerate, or is that cycle of 1 to 2 years, is that any tighter these days? Because so much of the tedious work of that seems like can be delegated to these.
That's true. One part, and I think that's still being discovered currently. So it's not something we could go out and report about and be like, oh, this is how you're going to do it. So everyone's still figuring it out, or doing their first having their first promising results on how that could accelerate. But there's definitely the element of transforming structured data or unstructured data into semantic data. So semantic data meaning it's computable, it's a computable resource that also has the business domain knowledge in it, so that you can do like really versatile things and combine your data in different like business useful ways. So I think that's my bet is it's going to accelerate the transformation part of the ETL pipeline, the semantic ETL pipeline, which is extract, transfer, and load. Or transform, actually, not transfer, transform. And other places where LLMs could accelerate, perhaps also the human process of, or at least validating. So if you're in there with your domain experts and you're trying to understand all the like central concepts of your business and how that would look like in data, then you can see if you've missed something or fill in the gaps or verify your outcome, your human process outcome with LLMs. So that can also give a little bit of assurance. But I think I have to say it's a little bit hypothetical still, like kind of tried a few things out and see, well, this seems to work, but I think I would want to report back on it in like a year or in 2 years.
Yeah, no, and you're also reminding, we've had a number of conversations where you've punctuated the conversation by saying, Larry, that's just what an ontologist does. So there's still plenty of work for human beings in this process. Well, and speaking of that, like you mentioned the most of the talent that you need is often in an enterprise. You just need that semantic web expert kind of guiding and organizing things. But there's a lot going on in this. You've mentioned like the ontology development, ETL pipelines, and but there's in the talk you did, you talked about, I think there were 10 roles that you mentioned in a talk you did reflecting on this. I guess just generally, maybe not all 10 of them, but like what's the general, there's like the ontological understanding, there's the data sourcing. What else is going on?
Yeah, there's definitely understanding semantic web, so knowing how to design ontologies, and then like how does the semantic web stack work? So that's more like specialized. So a backend developer could develop themselves to knowing about the semantic web technologies, but then you still need a bit of an ontology brain to really understand how to create ontologies. So you need to understand description logic. But then the other one is data. So just because you need to build data pipelines, that's not going away. You need to figure out how to like load a document, parse it, work with it, do things with it, and then serve it performantly to customers, all the way to customers, whoever those are, if they're e-commerce customers or if they're just internal customers. And then you do need the domain knowledge. Yes, and I would say the fourth axis here is product. So knowing how to actually prioritize the things you're doing. And then I kind of got that into 10 roles because I was using different combinations of things. I was saying that, well, if you combine ontology, knowledge, and domain expertise, then you have this person. Or if you combine product knowledge and domain expertise, then you have this. Or if you combine product and tech, then you have this. And so I was just kind of combining them and being like, you can have these kind of people, because my experience is also that you still need to tackle build your team case by case. You need to see what talent you have and where these people are willing to grow to. So, for example, I have had in one of my teams, I had a person who's really into engineering and knows and has a PhD in semantic web, but they didn't really like the social aspect of the semantic web thing. So they're like, I don't like want to sit with domain experts in a meeting room arguing about where this class should go. So then that person clearly is more like a knowledge engineer type of person. Whereas there was one who's like, yeah, I like to work with data, but I don't want to stare at my screen all the time. I also want to work with people. So that person clearly is more an ontologist. Same set of skills, same background, but then growing personally, fitting better into different kind of roles.
That's interesting. So there is just that as a leader, like if you come in as that semantic web with that semantic web expertise, and you look around and you go like, oh, all this great talent, and then that's a huge part of that fine tuning is like, oh, he's not going to like talking to people. She's going to love talking to, or, whatever it turns out. Tell me, did that team setup that you've talked about, does that kind of reflect the actual life you had at IKEA and Zalando? Did you have teams about those sizes, or?
Yeah, yes, it depends a little bit. It depends more on the use case, because these teams, I was always building knowledge graphs together with building use cases. So we would put up APIs that would then serve this information further to the e-commerce. So it was always also a part of building up a use case within the company, and because we needed to sell the thing as well. We couldn't just say we're creating you the most perfect optimized knowledge graph infrastructure and then you'll figure out how to use it. We can't do that. So in order to make a knowledge graph project successful in the company, you need to have your first like low-hanging fruit use case, probably has a little bit like not the most like fantastic description, logic, semantic web behind it, but has more like simple semantics behind it. And then you'll gain traction within your company and you'll start doing more. So ultimately, I would say a knowledge graph team within a company is like a startup, needs to figure out what the company needs today and what other teams are not able to solve. So we're like, okay, we can definitely solve that with knowledge graphs. Because knowledge graph isn't like a one application that does one thing. It's a paradigm shift in the way we work with data. It's a paradigm shift in the way we code, because now you don't need to put business logic into your code. Like I was talking about those code silos, you don't need to lock it away in there. You have your kind of maintain a semantic layer in your company that has all the business logic, also business rules, whatever. And then the applications make use of that and reuse that information. So I think like Dave McComb from Semantic Arts has talked a lot about data-centric revolution. And it's not about centralizing data, it's about having data at the center and having like the metadata at the center, so your semantic layer. And then applications become more lightweight because they don't have to rewrite over and over again the business logic into their code. They don't need to create their own data silo for the application to work. They're more like reusing the data from the data layer.
Yeah, that generic benefit, it seems like I've read Dave's book and follow him closely, and it seems like the benefit is so clear, but so many organizations, they still just source their own data from whenever they build a new application. It just, I see the same thing in the content world that I run in. But that's interesting, but like you were just saying too, that doesn't have to be like one centralized data source. You just need that semantic layer that helps you understand what you have and can work with. That's, and you mentioned a minute ago, I want to go back because so much of what we're talking about, I realize might be abstract to some people. And I want to kind of ground this in like some of those use cases that like, where does that $1 million of benefit come from? And so some of the use cases you've talked about, like one, you talked about an example of like search disambiguation and search terms around, like there was a Beyonce launched a fashion thing when you were at Zalando, and you're like, what's going on? And how can we help sell more products with this knowledge? Can you talk a little bit about like that search use case and maybe one or two other use cases?
Yeah, so the search use case was really fun. That was actually the low-hanging fruit that we tackled in Zalando. And it started from our search experts being confused why suddenly Beyonce is this like really popular but very low performing or like like badly performing search term in Zalando, and that's because Beyonce launched Ivy Park brand, and our customers couldn't really remember what that brand was called, but they certainly could remember that it's a brand by Beyonce. So obviously, humans are being humans. They're writing Beyonce into our search. And then the search experts were like, oh my God, we need to now do an override for all the combinations that we can find for Beyonce and for all the languages, all the like 20 plus web shops that we're running, because we're a European e-commerce site. So every country has their own e-commerce site. And then we were like, well, actually, with semantic web, you could disambiguate this. So we just do one connection of Beyonce to Ivy Park. And every time your search hits Beyonce, it will return you all the Ivy Park products. So we can do this also with like not doing these manual overrides, but actually adding that knowledge of Beyonce designed Ivy Park or launched Ivy Park or is associated with Ivy Park if you can express it that easily. And then we use that to argue. And obviously at that point, the manual overrides were already done. So we never actually tackled Beyonce. We just used that as an argumentation of you could do this a little bit simpler. And then we tackled the top 20 of the low performing search terms that were most popularly used by our customers. And I remember us estimating if we solve these, we will make a 7-figure sum, even after returns. And then we started tackling them. One of those search terms, winter. So winter was performing badly. And what we did is with the semantic web layer, with the knowledge graph, we explained that winter means like find me all products that are filled with down, feather, warmly padded, made out of wool, using some of these trademark warming technologies. They're like tens of those trademark technology. Every brand has their own. And then just basically connecting winter to product traits. And that helped us to then find all the products. And then suddenly through A/B testing of like having the A variant of search is performing in the traditional manner, search is augmented with knowledge graph information, we could see that the B variant was performing so much better, and our customers were clicking happily and interacting happily with the search results for any winter-related search. And this we did for a few of these terms. And yeah, and it wasn't like, I think our team didn't cost as much as we brought in money. So it was really, on the plus side for the company as well.
Nice. As you were talking about that, you reminded me of a talk you did at the Knowledge Graph conference a couple of years ago about the recommendation engine that you built and how it's sort of like, I think, it's because like you were talking about, okay, winter down, those things are related. And you talked about how you ensconce the subject matter expertise of your interior designers at IKEA to make better recommendations. That seems like another classic use case.
Yes, definitely. Recommendations is the other. I would say search is one recommendation, and the third one is info box. So for sustainability, if there's like a certain fabric with a certification, how they have these certifications, then you could serve an info box saying this is what it means, this certification, this is why we're calling it sustainable. But the recommendation is really interesting. That's also quite simple to solve, because for IKEA, it was all about, like, IKEA has a very nicely honed process of how they're displaying things in the warehouse. In the stores. And so like every interior designer who's ever worked in IKEA knows these rules. And there's not so many of them. So they have them in their minds. There's a sofa or a couch that you can pair up with a throw or a decorative cushion to add more comfort, or with a lint roller to, get all the hair out and or to maintain its nice surface. And those rules we can put into a knowledge graph. So we can say every time, like, any sofa can be matched with any decorative cushion. And then in addition, we would add rules of prioritize matching the same styles. or prioritize matching the same price level. So these kind of things we could add to that. But that's a handful of rules, and that's like one interior designer, one IKEA domain expert, just putting those connections. Before that, and they would manually do that. So they would manually go through their tens of thousands of products and match them with each other. But with knowledge graphs, you can abstract that and you can say any sofa with any cushion plus these rules, and then that's it. And it seems like a no-brainer, and it's like, well, you could do it in Python as well, but then your logic of a sofa and cushion go well together is locked in Python. You cannot reuse it. So what we had is we had our computer vision friends who are, helping customers to find the right products when they are in the store, and they just use an app to look at the things. They were like, oh my God, we can reuse this because this will make our algorithm of, finding, understanding what's in the picture much more performant, because we can also already narrow it down to next to a sofa, you will most likely find these products. Instead of going through the entire product catalog, they know that, okay, this thing we can reuse. So that's the benefit of a semantic layer. That's the benefit of a knowledge graph, that somebody's putting some smart stuff into the semantic layer. It's not locked away in somebody's Python code. And then different use cases can reuse that same information.
Yeah, I want to go back to people stuff now, because convincing developers that that's a better way to do it, because any one developer tackling a project is just like, I can do that in Python, and boom, they just do it. How do you convey to like individual engineers, and probably more germane to an organization, like, no, there's a better way. Have you had success with that, or?
By showing. So you get that low-hanging fruit use case. And then you just wait for the other team to appear and be like, oh, we can reuse this information. Then point proven. I've argued my case. So you just wait for it to happen. I mean, it happened at Zalando. The things we did for search was then later reused for contextual recommendation of like, oh, you're looking at a blazer. Well, here are other businessy clothes that you can look at. And in IKEA, it was, okay, we're tackling this recommendation. And then quite quickly, another team found out about it. And I've talked to friends who've also worked in bigger knowledge graph projects like Google, and they said that that's what happens, that people come knocking to your door and be like, you have that knowledge graph, you have that information, can I reuse it? Mm-hmm. So it seems to go organically like that. And then even if you tell business about it, like this is going to happen, they don't really believe you until they need to see it to believe it.
That's right. And there's more stories like that floating around now because of the rise of knowledge graphs. But one of the things that comes out, like if you do a Google search for knowledge graph, you're as likely to find information about labeled property graphs like Neo4j as you are to find RDF stack kind of stuff. I'm going to ask you to pitch the benefits of a standards-based approach like RDF. Not that Neo4j is awesome. A lot of people get a lot of value out of it. But in terms of the kind of work you're talking about, can you talk about why the RDF stack is sort of the best way to do this?
Well, I would say that RDF stack and LPGs, labeled property graphs, are just different stacks meant for different use cases. If you want to have this if you want to do graph algorithms and calculate path distances, then labeled property graphs are definitely the way to go. And we've seen that it machine learning interacts really well with this network of data. So that's why I think it's currently so popular. Plus Neo4j has fantastic marketing department. They're really good at pushing these things. When it comes to RDF, first of all, it's a standard by a research community, so it doesn't really have a marketing machine. It doesn't really have anyone thinking about its brand. So that's the first part. But then what RDF does really well is the schema. So the ontology level, the reasoning layers, all the things that the description logic side of things. And it's just a different approach. It's more about thinking about the form and having that conversation. So if you want to realize a semantic layer together with domain experts and kind of have those business rules and have those associations of sofa goes well with cushion, it's best realized in the schema, with the schema, with ontologies, and then some Scots concept schemes, like we would call them vocabularies or taxonomies. So you kind of do that best. So the search disambiguation, info boxes, and recommendation, as we did in IKEA, I would realize with RDF and with that like well-defined part. And then probably some any calculations, big data calculations you need to do where having things in graph form is of benefit, I would do with LPGs like Neo4j.
Okay, that's helpful because I think a lot of people are fairly new to this, so that's a really good distinction between those. Hey, Katariina, I can't believe it. We're coming up on time already. But before we wrap, is there anything you want to revisit from the conversation or just make sure we share?
I think my message, I guess, out there, or what I want to put out there is that when it comes to e-commerce, knowledge graphs make a lot of sense. And if you're a big e-commerce vendor, you shouldn't overlook it. You should really try to solve it other way, because I just see it as solved. I've done it now for 8 years. Now I'm working on other things in my stealth mode startup, more to be continued, more information later on. But the past 8 years have taught me that this is really the way to go. This technology works. And yeah, it shouldn't, at this point, there's I'd love to hear the arguments, but I don't think there are any arguments why you shouldn't invest in knowledge graphs if you're running an e-commerce platform.
Nice. Well, I appreciate you being out in the future figuring that out. Now it's like settled science. Everybody should just do it this way, and there you go. So thanks. Oh, one very last thing, Katariina. If folks want to connect with you online or follow you, what's the best way to find you online?
Yeah, LinkedIn would be the best one. And my handle on LinkedIn, which is like linkedin.com/IN, I guess, my handle is KATSI. So that's Katsi. That's what my family calls me. What everyone in Finland calls me, because that's a Finnish nickname.
Okay. We're all honorary Finns now in the world. So, well, thanks so much, Katariina. Always fun to talk with you.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for having me.
For show notes and to sign up for our newsletter, visit our website at knowledgegraphinsights.com, and please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for listening.